Imagine you're watching a high-stakes dance performance. One dancer is all sharp, aggressive movements, pure energy and light, while the other is fluid, silent, and retreating into the shadows. At first, it looks like a fight, a struggle for dominance where one must eventually crush the other, but then you notice something strange. The aggressive dancer only has momentum because the fluid one gives way, and the silent dancer only has a shape because of the light provided by the other. They aren't fighting at all, they are keeping each other alive. Most of us look at the world as a series of either-ors. You're either successful or a failure, the world is either chaotic or orderly, and you're either the one pushing forward or the one being pushed. We treat these opposites like enemies at war. But thousands of years ago, during a period of relentless conflict known as the Warring States in China, philosophers looked at the same chaos and saw something completely different. They didn't see a battle to be won, they saw a Taiji, a great pole, where every force, no matter how dark, carried the seed of its own opposite. They called it Yin and Yang. It's a concept we've turned into a trendy symbol on t-shirts and yoga mats, often dismissed as a simple cliche about balance. But when you look closer at the Book of Changes, or the ancient practice of Chinese medicine, you realize this isn't just a passive observation. It's a radical way of deconstructing reality. It suggests that your greatest strength is actually the source of your deepest weakness, and that within your most crushing defeat lies the precise blueprint for your next victory. So why did an ancient civilization decide that binary thinking was a trap? And how does this 2,000-year-old dance of opposites actually explain everything from the way you breathe to the strange behavior of subatomic particles in a quantum lab? To understand the harmony, we first have to understand the friction.
That's a really powerful way to frame this whole discussion, that idea of the dance. Because I think most of us, especially in the West, we see the symbol, the Taiji, and we just think balance. You know, a little bit of good, a little bit of bad.
Right, like it's a static image, a 50-50 split.
Exactly. But what you've just described, the dance, that's the key. It's not a noun, it's a verb. It's an active, perpetual process of interaction. And if you start looking at it as an operating system for reality, not just a cool symbol, then suddenly everything from, well, geopolitics to manufacturing starts to look very different.
It does. And that's the mission for us in this deep dive. We're trying to connect these, seemingly disparate worlds. We've got ancient Chinese philosophy on one hand, and on the other, modern case studies about infrastructure projects and semiconductor supply chains.
It seems like a huge leap, but it's not. It's the same fundamental pattern playing out on different scales. The friction and the harmony, you can't have one without the other.
So let's start with the biggest scale. Let's start with the macro structure, with governance. We're calling this first part the architecture of resilience, because resilience is really what this is all about.
It is. It's about building systems that don't just withstand shocks, but actually get stronger from them.
And to really ground this, to take it from the abstract to something concrete, I came across a story that I think just perfectly encapsulates this whole dynamic.
Yep.
I've heard a story about a veteran bridge engineer, a man named Lao Chen. He spent something like 3 decades in Guizhou, which is this province known for its, almost impossibly difficult terrain, karst mountains, deep gorges.
Right. The bridges there are engineering marvels.
They're incredible. And for 30 years, Lao Chen's world has been rock, steel, and concrete, the smell of wet cement and diesel fuel. To him, the real work, the true foundation of everything are these massive concrete pillars he pours. He sees them as the yin.
The heavy, the stable, the silent.
Exactly, the bones of the earth, as he put it, the part that doesn't move. But recently, his team has been integrated with a much younger group, and he's working alongside a software developer named Xiao Li. And Xiao Li's job is to manage what they call a digital twin of the bridge.
So a real-time data model of the entire structure.
It's all fluid, invisible data, constantly analyzing, predicting stress points, modeling airflow, even before they happen. And this, to Xiao Li, is the yang. It's the light, the fast, the intelligent part of the system. And you can guess what happened at first. There was this friction. Lao Chen, the old-timer, he admitted he thought the digital twin was basically a video game, a toy. The real work was in the concrete.
And I'm sure Xiao Li thought the concrete was just dumb matter, the necessary but uninteresting part.
The code was the brain. The concrete was just brute force. But over the course of the project, they had this gradual, profound realization. They saw that the heavy stone, the yin, needs the code to be governed. Otherwise, it's just a blind giant, strong but directionless, vulnerable to stresses it can't see.
A blind giant phrase.
Yang It's useless without the stone to have purpose, has nothing to analyze, nothing to protect. And it was in that synthesis that a truly resilient structure was born. The strategic integration of yin-yang dialectics into modern state governance demonstrates how the balance between massive infrastructure development and technological innovation creates a resilient economic ecosystem capable of sustaining long-term national growth.
That story it's perfect. Because it illustrates the failure of our modern intuition. We are so conditioned to think of progress as a one-way street.
A move away from the old stuff.
Yes. A move away from the heavy, the physical, the yin, towards the light, the digital, the yang. We talk about moving from the industrial age to the information age as if we're just leaving industry behind in a museum somewhere.
Right, we want to upload everything to the cloud and forget that the ground exists. We think that's progress.
But it's a fantasy. The cloud is just someone else's computer. It's a massive hot server farm in a physical building, powered by a physical grid, connected by very heavy, very real fiber optic cables laid on the ocean floor. The yang of the digital world is completely, utterly dependent on the yin of physical infrastructure.
You can't escape it.
And this brings us right to the first and maybe the most important of what are sometimes called the laws of yin-yang dialectics. It's the law of opposition and interdependence.
Yeah, the opposition part feels pretty intuitive.
That's the part we see easily. It's the conflict, the difference. Lao Chen's concrete is hard, static, heavy. Xiao Li's code is weightless, dynamic, fluid. They're opposites in their fundamental nature.
One is fixed, one is in motion.
And in the traditional framework, you'd label these with qualities. Yang is seen as masculine, active, strong, bright, expansive. Yin is feminine, passive, yielding, dark, heavy. They are opposing forces.
But the second part, interdependence, that's where the deeper insight lies.
That's the paradigm shift. Because our Western sort of Aristotelian logic tends to say if two things are opposites, one must be true and the other false. They are in a struggle for dominance.
One has to win.
One has to win. But the Eastern dialectic says their opposition is precisely what makes them necessary for each other. The ancient texts use this beautiful, simple analogy from nature that I think makes it so clear. The sun-facing side of a mountain cannot exist without the shaded side.
Of course. You can't have a one-sided mountain. It's a logical impossibility.
It's impossible. And yet that's what we try to do all the time. We try to build a one-sided reality. We want profit without stability. We want innovation without the boring, heavy work of manufacturing. We want the sun-facing side of everything.
And when you do that, you're not just, cutting off the past. You're actively undermining the future you're trying to build.
You are sawing off the branch you are sitting on. Xiao Li's digital twin is a brilliant piece of yang technology, but it has zero purpose without Lao Chen's yin bridge. That interdependence, that tension between the two, is what creates a resilient system.
Because if you only have the digital side, what happens?
You're incredibly fragile. A power outage, a server failure, a cyber attack, and you have nothing.
And if you only have the concrete?
Efficient. You're strong. But you're that blind giant. You can't adapt, you can't predict, you'll eventually break under a stress you never saw coming. You need the friction between them to see and to act.
Makes sense. The opposition creates the whole, which that flows directly into the second law, doesn't it? The one that feels very relevant to, just about everything happening in the global economy. The law of waxing and waning.
Xiaozheng. This moves us from the static relationship to the dynamic one. This law addresses quantitative change.
Meaning change in amount, not in type.
In the West, we have this tendency to look at power dynamics as a snapshot in time. We ask, who's on top right now? Who's winning? We see a chart of GDP or military strength, and we treat it as a final score.
The end of the game.
Right. But the yin-yang perspective sees it as a continuous flow, like breathing. Inhale, exhale. Nothing is static. Power is not a possession, it's a current. When one force expands, its opposite must, by necessity, recede. But
it's the cycle of the seasons, or the tides. The tide comes in, the tide goes out. It's not a victory or a defeat for the oceans.
That's a perfect analogy of the tide. And if you want to see this law playing out on a global scale, the data we have on the economic relationship between the United States and China from, say, 1989 to 2019 is probably the clearest real-world example you could find.
What does the data show?
Well, you look at the late 80s. And the disparity in terms of share of global GDP is just enormous. The U.S. is this massive, dominant economic force, the peak of yang, you could say. expansive, powerful, setting the rules.
The undisputed winner of the Cold War.
Unquestionably.
Yeah.
But over the next 30 years, what you see is not a static picture, but a dynamic process, a massive, historically unprecedented redistribution of economic weight.
And the typical narrative for that is what? A story of one side winning and the other losing.
The typical binary narrative is often framed in terms of conflict, right? Theft of intellectual property, unfair trade practices, conquest of markets. It's framed as a zero-sum battle.
Which implies that if the trend continues, one will be 0 and the other will be 100.
Correct. But the law of Shaozheng waxing and waning offers a different lens. It suggests this isn't necessarily a battle to be won or lost, but a natural rebalancing. The core principle is when yang reaches its extreme limit, yin begins to grow, and vice versa. The system seeks equilibrium.
It changes the entire emotional framing of history. It's not just a series of random conflicts or surprising events anymore. It's more like a hydraulic system. If you push down with immense pressure over here,
A corresponding rise over there is almost inevitable. The energy has to go somewhere. It's a closed system. And that pressure, that buildup, is what sets the stage for the third law, which is maybe the most subtle and powerful one of all.
the law of transformation.
Right. This is where the quantitative change we just talked about, the waxing and waning, reaches a tipping point and becomes a qualitative change, a change in the very nature of the thing itself.
This is that famous Lao Easy quote, isn't it? The one that sounds like a riddle. Misfortune lurks within good fortune. Good fortune arises from misfortune.
That's the one. It sounds like a lovely paradox for a fortune cookie, but it's actually a deeply practical observation about how reality works. Let's apply it to something very specific and very current.
The chip war.
The chip war, the ongoing strategic competition over high-end semiconductors.
So you have these heavy restrictions put in place to block the export of the most advanced chips and chip-making technology.
Right. Now, if you look at that through a simple linear lens, what do you see?
You see a misfortune for the side being restricted. Their technological development is being choked off. It's a clear negative.
It's suppression, a blockage. It's an imposition of extreme yin being contained, restricted, forced into a passive position. The flow of vital energy, in this case technology, is cut off. From a purely static point of view, it's a crippling move.
But the dialectic forces you to ask a different question.
It forces you to look inside that darkness, inside that misfortune, and ask, what seed is being planted here? What is growing in this silence?
The restriction forces a change in behavior. You can't rely on the easy path anymore.
The analysis from our sources argues that this intense external pressure, this misfortune, acted as a radical, maybe even an essential catalyst for domestic independence in that sector.
Because the incentive structure completely changed overnight.
It was a paradigm shift. Companies like Huawei or SMEC, they were suddenly facing an existential threat. The choice was simple. Develop your own capabilities from the ground up or wither and die. The comfortable option of simply buying the best from abroad was gone.
So the pressure that was meant to weaken them?
Transformed into the primary driver of their new strength. The misfortune of the blockade contained the seed of the fortune of self-reliance. It's not just that they were forced to run faster. They were forced to build their own legs.
So the attempt to stop the flow of the river didn't just dam it up. It actually forced the creation of a whole new, separate wellspring.
That is the mechanism of transformation. The quantitative pressure reaches a point where the system can't just bend anymore. It has to break and reform into something new. If you see reality as static, a ban is just a ban. It's an endpoint. But if you see it as a dynamic dialectic, a ban is an energy input. It's a catalyst that necessitates a powerful transformative reaction. The yin contains the seed of the yang.
Okay, this is a lot to take in. We've looked at the hardware of a nation, bridges, the chips, the big economic flows. I want to shift gears now and look at the software, if you will, the people.
The social fabric.
Social harmony as a survival strategy. And this is where I think the cultural differences can feel the most pronounced and maybe the most challenging for a Western audience to really grasp.
It was where the philosophical rubber really meets the road of daily life.
And again, to make this real, I was reading this fascinating online thread about a community organizer in a very dense urban district of Hangzhou. Her name is Mother Zhang.
Okay.
And the context was a recent period of really extreme weather. A heat wave followed by flooding, which caused all sorts of resource fluctuations. Power, water, food deliveries. A classic crisis scenario. And her job was to coordinate the daily needs of 500 families in her block.
That's an immense responsibility.
And the story described this one critical moment. Things were tense, resources were tight, and a few individuals were getting really frustrated with the strict collective protocols she had put in place. Why can't I get my delivery now? This is messing up my personal schedule. The kind of individualistic friction you'd expect.
The desire to prioritize the self over the group, especially under stress.
Right. But Mother Zhang didn't argue with them on that level. She didn't scold them or pull rank. Instead, she just calmly started talking about the concept of the Great Harmony.
Interesting. How did she explain it?
She used this very simple, very powerful metaphor. She said that in their culture, the individual is like a single drop of water, and the community is the river. And she said, if the river stays healthy and flows within its banks, every single drop of water is carried safely to its destination. But if the river overflows and floods, that individual drop is lost in the chaos. Her point was that her job, the reason for the strict protocols, was to protect the integrity of the river, to maintain that collective yin of social order, precisely so that the yang of individual life and prosperity could eventually flourish again once the crisis passed. Understanding the yin-yang principle of social harmony provides a profound explanation for why Eastern civilizations prioritize collective stability and systemic efficiency as essential survival strategies in an increasingly volatile global landscape.
The individual is a drop, the community is the rivers. It really crystallizes a fundamental difference in worldview.
I think for many people listening, particularly those raised in the West, that can feel very alien.
It can feel like a loss of self, can it? We're taught to be the rock in the river, to stand firm against the current. We're not taught to be the water.
And that brings us right back to that either-or trap we talked about at the beginning. The default Western framework, stemming from Enlightenment ideals, often pits the individual against the state.
It's a conflict, a zero-sum game. Exactly. If the state gains more power or control, I, the individual, must have less freedom. My rights are being infringed upon. It's a relationship of inherent tension and opposition.
We see ourselves as separate from the system of governance.
But the Taiji worldview, which Mother Zhang was expressing, doesn't see it that way. It sees the individual within the state, the drop within the river. It's not about submission in a coercive sense. It's about finding your proper place within a larger life-sustaining structure.
It's the white dot inside the black fish and the black dot inside the white fish. You are a distinct individual part, but your very existence and identity are defined by your relationship to the larger whole.
Exactly. And this is where a concept like Ren, which is usually translated as benevolence or humaneness, stops being just a personal virtue and becomes a core principle of economics and governance.
I usually think of benevolence as, charity, donating to a cause, being kind to your neighbor.
But in a Confucian context, it's also structural. It's about designing a system that is inherently humane. There's a famous and often misunderstood line from the philosopher Mencius in one of our texts. He's advising a king, and he asks, what is the point of mentioning the word profit? All that matters is that there should be benevolence and rightness.
Oh, okay. I have to admit, to modern ears, that sounds like absolutely terrible business advice. If a CEO stood up today and said, we're not going to talk about profit anymore, the stock would plummet in seconds.
Of course, because we read it through our either-or lens. We assume he's saying profit is bad and benevolence is good, so we must choose benevolence.
Right, choose one.
But if you look deeper through the Taiji lens, he isn't saying profit is bad at all. He is saying that profit is a consequence. It's the natural result of a healthy, well-ordered, benevolent system. It's not the primary driver.
So you don't chase profit directly?
You don't. You chase the health of the river. If you focus only on extracting profit for yourself, the individual yang impulse, and you ignore the health of the community, the environment, your workers, the collective yin foundation, you are literally poisoning your own water supply. You are destroying the riverbank.
And eventually the river floods, and everyone, including the person who is so focused on profit, drowns in the chaos they helped create.
So in this view, benevolence isn't a fluffy, nice-to-have virtue. It is a long-term sustainability strategy. It's the most pragmatic survival strategy there is.
It's a whole different way of calculating value.
A completely different way. And it's all held together by what our sources call the three pillars of this harmonious philosophy. The first is the Taiji philosophical worldview, the idea of the whole we've been discussing. The second is the Yin-Yang dialectical methodology, the how, the dance of opposites.
And the third?
The third is a set of core values that grease the wheels of the whole system. And they are benevolence, Ren, as we've discussed, but also righteousness, Yi, propriety, Hige, wisdom, Si, and trustworthiness.
Trustworthiness. That one seems particularly important from an economic standpoint.
It's huge. Think about it in practical terms. A society with low levels of trust has incredibly high transaction costs, meaning everything is more expensive and slower because you can't rely on the other party. You need armies of lawyers, incredibly complex contracts for every little thing, elaborate insurance policies, security guards, auditors, verification systems. All of that is friction. It's waste energy in the system.
It's drag.
It's massive drag. But if you operate in a high trust environment, a system with high social harmony, a lot of that friction just disappears. Deals can be done on a handshake. Supply chains move faster. The whole system becomes more efficient.
So what we might see as a lack of individual freedom following strict protocols is reframed as the key to collective efficiency and speed. Harmony is efficiency.
It's not just about everyone being nice to each other. It's a design principle for reducing drag on the entire collective organism so it can survive and prosper in a dangerous world.
This also brings up another concept from the notes that I found really interesting, which is mutual penetration. It sounds a bit intense.
But it's a very useful idea.
Yeah.
It just refers to the way that yin and yang, or in this case, different civilizational models, naturally permeate each other over time.
Okay, so it's not just about one side influencing the other.
No, it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
We often talk about the westernization of the East. You go to Shanghai or Tokyo and you see suits, skyscrapers, stock markets, people drinking Starbucks. That is the yang of the West. It's active, commercial, individualistic culture penetrating the East.
But it's not a conquest. It flows the other way, too.
Absolutely. At the same time, you see the export of traditionally Eastern soft culture into the West. Things like acupuncture, Taiji, mindfulness and meditation practices, the global popularity of Asian cuisine. These are all elements of the yin, the more introspective, holistic, and communal aspects of Eastern thought permeating the West.
So it's not cultural contamination, which is how it's sometimes framed?
From a dialectical perspective, it's not contamination at all. It's the natural and necessary blending of forces. It is the white dot of yang appearing in the black fish of yin and vice versa. It's a sign that the global system is, in its own chaotic way, seeking a new, more complex harmony.
So we've gone from the nation down to the community. Now I want to zoom in even further, right down to the microscopic level of production and innovation. This is section 3, the synergy of manufacturing and innovation. This is where we get to see how these philosophies actually get translated into building things and creating value.
This is where the theory becomes steel and silicon.
Exactly. And I recently watched this short documentary that featured a man named Director Waning. He runs a high-precision manufacturing plant down in the Pearl River Delta.
The workshop of the world.
And his factory was a perfect example of yin. It was the silent, anonymous, hard-working muscle churning out physical components for Western companies. Reliable, efficient, but largely invisible.
The heavy, stable base.
But he had this insight. He realized that being the muscle, the yin, without developing a spirit, a yang, would eventually lead to exhaustion and obsolescence. You'd always be taking orders, never setting the direction.
So he needed to develop his own intelligence, his own innovative spark.
He began investing every spare dollar back into domestic research and development. He started filing his own patents. He essentially transformed his factory floor from just a place of assembly into a playground for robotics, material science, and proprietary technology. The yang of intellectual energy.
So he was creating a feedback loop.
He described the foundational energy of his factory as a Taiji circle. The more physical parts they produced, the yin, the more data they gathered, the more processes they perfected. And that experience directly fueled their next patent, their next innovation, the yang. The application of traditional holistic balance to modern industrial manufacturing illustrates how the synergy between physical production capacity and high-tech patent transformation serves as the foundational energy for the inevitable return of Eastern civilizational influence.
Director Wang's story is the perfect ground-level rebuttal to this pervasive idea in the West that manufacturing is a dead sector, that it's low-value work that you should just outsource.
The dirty work.
The dirty work. He's showing us that the factory floor, the place where you actually make things, is the ultimate laboratory. It's where theory meets reality.
He's using the physical production process itself to generate the next wave of intellectual property.
And this model, this feedback loop he created, maps almost perfectly onto a much older Chinese system of thought called the 5 phases, or wuxing.
It's usually in the context of traditional medicine or even astrology, right? Earth, metal, water, wood, and fire.
That's where you usually encounter it. But one of our sources applies this framework directly to a modern economic ecosystem. And when you see it laid out, it's really fascinating. It's a complete model of a self-sustaining economy.
All right, let's walk through that generating cycle. It starts with Earth. What does Earth represent here?
Earth bears metal. In this economic analogy, Earth is the national infrastructure. It's the roads, the bridges of Lao Chen, the high-speed rail, the power grid, the factory floor of Director Wang. It's the stable physical foundation.
Okay, so the Earth is the yin base.
Exactly. And that solid foundation, the Earth, allows for the creation of metal. Metal represents social products, wealth, hard goods, the actual things a society manufactures.
You need the Earth to make the metal. Enough. What's next?
Then metal collects water. Water, in this model, represents flow. It's trade volume, logistics, the movement of capital, supply chains. The very existence of products and wealth, metal, is what generates this flow, water.
Right, if you don't have anything to sell, you don't have trade. The goods create the flow.
Then the cycle gets really interesting. Water nourishes wood. This is a beautiful metaphorical leap. Wood here represents civil society. It's education, healthcare, the arts, people-to-people exchanges. A strong, consistent flow of trade and capital, water, is what provides the resources to support a robust, healthy, growing society. Wood.
So a strong economy allows for the development of a strong society. You need the surplus from the flow to invest in people.
And here's the spark, the final generative step. Wood feeds fire. What does fire represent?
Energy, light.
Innovation. Cultural prosperity, scientific breakthroughs, vitality, the spirit that Director Wang was trying to cultivate in his factory. The argument is that you cannot have the bright fire of innovation without the dense, healthy wood of a well-educated, stable civil society to burn.
And what happens to the fire? It doesn't just burn out.
No, it completes the circle. Fire produces earth. The ashes from the fire enrich the soil. The prosperity and technological breakthroughs, fire, eventually settle back down to expand and upgrade the foundational economic infrastructure, earth. The new technology becomes the new railway. The new software becomes the new grid management.
Wow. It's a complete self-sustaining loop. Earth to metal to water to wood to fire and back to earth.
And it really, really highlights the profound danger of trying to skip steps in this cycle.
Yeah.
Well, many economies, particularly in the West, have become fixated on fire, on innovation, on the service economy, on the digital world. And at the same time, they've neglected their earth, their manufacturing base, their infrastructure.
They want the fire, but they've outsourced the wood and let the earth erode.
And the five phases model would say that is an unsustainable path. Eventually, you run out of fuel to burn, the fire sputters out. That's where the other side of the model, the overcoming cycle, comes in. It's a diagnostic tool for when the system is out of balance. It describes how the phases can control or contain each other. For example, the model says Earth contains water. So if you're facing a crisis related to water, say, geopolitical conflict or trade disruptions that threaten your flow, what's the solution?
We strengthen the earth.
You strengthen your economic foundation. You double down on infrastructure and domestic production to contain the external disruption. Or another one, metal chops wood. If your civil society, wood, is stagnating or blocked, what do? You focus on generating wealth and products, metal, to break through the stagnation and create new opportunities. It's a dynamic playbook for managing a complex system.
It's a fascinating model. And speaking of managing complex systems, I want to pivot to the absolute beginning of the innovation cycle, the part that's pure chaos, the fuzzy front end.
The FFES. For anyone in product development or R&D, this is the most exciting and the most terrifying phase.
Describe it for us. What is the fuzzy front end?
It's that chaotic, messy, undefined period at the very start of any new project. It's before you have a clear product spec, before you have a target market, before you even really know what you're building. It's the brainstorming phase, but on an industrial scale.
It's pure potential, but also pure uncertainty.
Exactly. It's a state of pure yang. All energy, no form. And what people now call a VUCA, world volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous learning, how to navigate that fuzziness, how to find a signal in that noise, is arguably the single most important job a leader has.
So how do you apply these principles of yin and yang to manage that chaos? How do you give it form?
The source material suggests a model of open innovation that's built on balancing two opposing forces, market pull and tech push.
Okay. Tech push feels like the old traditional way of doing things, right? The lone genius inventor in his lab has a brilliant idea and then tries to convince the world it needs it.
Exactly. It's an inside-out approach. It's very yin in a way. It's internally generated, incubated in silence, and then pushed out onto the world. And it can lead to massive breakthroughs, but it's also incredibly risky.
Because you might spend millions developing something nobody actually wants.
The market pull approach is the opposite. It's the Yang approach. It's outside in. You don't start with the idea. You start by listening to the chaos of the market. You immerse yourself in customer problems and market trends, and you let the needs of the outside world pull the solution out of your organization.
And the argument is that in a volatile, fast-changing world, market pull is a safer bet.
It's generally faster and far less risky because you are co-creating this solution with the market. You are moving with the river, not trying to swim against it. The key is to vertically integrate your suppliers and your customers directly into that fuzzy, chaotic design phase.
You invite the outside world into your chaos.
You use the yin of their concrete needs and feedback to give form to the yang of your innovative energy. You stabilize the uncertainty by grounding it in reality.
This feels very connected to the concept of Kaizen, the idea of continuous improvement.
So Kaizen, which literally means change for good, is the operational methodology for navigating this. But it's not just about making small tweaks. The source talks about different levels of Kaizen.
More than one level.
Yes. There's point Kaizen. That's the simplest form. A tool's broken on the factory floor, you fix it. A small, isolated improvement.
Okay.
Then there's line Kaizen. That's looking at a whole process. You connect multiple points to optimize an entire assembly line or a workflow. It's a bigger, more systemic improvement. The third is cube Kaizen. And this is the most profound. This is where you connect the entire system into a single organism. You're not just optimizing your line. You're connecting your suppliers, your factory, and your customers into one continuous, harmonious feedback loop.
So everyone is improving together.
Everyone is part of the same nervous system. And to make that organism function at a high level, you need an incredible amount of discipline and order.
This is the 5S methodology.
The 5S. It comes from Japan, but it's pure applied Taoist philosophy. Seri, sort, get rid of what's unnecessary. Satan, set in order, a place for everything and everything in its place. Seiso, shine, which means cleanliness. Seiketsu, standardize, create a consistent process. And finally, shitsuke, sustain or discipline.
On the surface, it sounds like a very elaborate janitorial checklist. Sort, clean, organize.
It does, but it's profoundly strategic. Think about the yin of seiso, cleanliness. By creating a state of perfect physical order and stillness in the factory, you create the necessary condition for the yang of high-speed, error-free production to happen.
Because you can't have speed and precision if the environment is dirty and chaotic.
The stillness supports the motion, the order supports the speed, the yin enables the yang. It's the same principle everywhere.
Which brings us all the way back to the top, to the leader, to the CEO. If the factory floor needs this kind of stillness to function, what does the leader need in their mind?
The source calls it CEO mindfulness. In a market that is pure, yang chaotic, noisy, fast, overwhelming, the leader must cultivate a state of profound inner yin, inner stillness.
They have to be the eye of the storm.
They have to be the calm, unmoving center. Because when you are in that fuzzy front end, when you're dealing with all that uncertainty, you are drowning in data. You cannot possibly process it all rationally and logically. There's too much noise.
So what do you rely on?
You have to rely on what the Japanese call tacit knowledge, what we might call intuition or a gut feeling. But it's not a magical guess. It's a deep, nonverbal understanding that comes from years of experience. And that intuition can only surface, you can only hear that signal from a mind that is quiet enough to reflect reality clearly without distortion.
So the leader's primary job isn't to be the one shouting the loudest or moving the fastest.
Their job is to be the one listening the deepest, to be the unmoving pivot point that allows the entire wheel of the organization to turn with speed and grace.
We have covered an incredible amount of ground today. We've gone from the concrete mountains of Guizhou to the social harmony of a Hangzhou community, all the way down to the microscopic improvements on a factory floor in the Pearl River Delta.
And through it all, we've seen the same pattern repeat, the same dance of opposites.
It really forces you to reconsider how we're conditioned to see the world. We see these things as enemies that need to be defeated. Growth versus stability, the individual versus the collective, the new versus the old.
We see them as binary choices, as either-ors. You have to pick a side. But the Yin-Yang perspective gives us a completely different tool. It says these opposites aren't just balanced against each other. They're actively generating each other.
It goes right back to that opening image of the dance. The aggressive dancer only has momentum because the fluid dancer gives way. The friction between them isn't a problem to be solved. It's the very source of the system's energy.
And that is the ultimate lesson here, I think. The goal isn't to eliminate the half of reality that you fear or dislike. The goal is to understand how its weight, its darkness, is essential for giving momentum to the side you value.
We often spend our lives trying to eliminate the negative half of our reality, trying to banish chaos, silence doubt, or outrun failure. But if the ancient sages were right, then your current struggle isn't a sign that the system is broken, it is simply the friction required to turn the wheel. The question is not how to defeat the dark, but how to use its weight to give momentum to the light.